Welcome to the OC24 podcast, where we've taken some of the best talks and discussions from this year's 24-hour conference on global organised crime, which showcases some of the most interesting research into organised crime around the world. This episode is called Hiding Dirty Money in Plain Sight, a case study on following the money.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Reitano. I'm the Deputy Director of the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime, and it is a great honour and a great privilege to welcome you all to the first session of Organised Crime Fest 2021. 24 hours of a ridiculous amount of fascinating research, interesting perspectives from a diverse set of stakeholders. We had a blast last year, a sleepless blast, but a really good session, a really good exchange, which was then carried over into a series of podcasts, interviews that were published online, and a lot of great informal contacts which have been built up and continued throughout the year. So we're thrilled to see so many of you back with us and a number of new names and faces. Without further ado, I'm going to kick off panel 1D, which is Hiding Dirty Money in Plain Sight, a case study on following the money. We are thrilled to have with us today three panelists, David, Gus, and Niels, who I will introduce properly in a second, who will each be presenting and talking around a series of cases which demonstrate how organized crime groups are working, how they're facilitating illicit activities and the money that flows from it through our financial systems. All three, Gus, Niels, and David, are serving or former police officers in their national police agencies and have an enormous amount of experience to bring to the table. We will be doing roughly 10-minute presentations, all of which are interrelated, and then we will open up for an opportunity for questions. What we would ask of all of those who've joined us today is if you could please keep your microphones on mute during the presentations. If you have questions, to put them into the chat box. We will probably be processing or possibly packaging those questions since it is a relatively limited time for discussion afterwards. And then the panelists will have at least 2 rounds to respond. So just to reiterate, microphones on mute, please, and put your questions as they come up into the chat so we can take a look at them. If there are any major issues, please just message to the Secretariat, either to the stream managers who are marked with the 24 symbol, and they will try and address your concerns. So thank you very much again for joining us, and let's start the substantive work. First hour of 24 to come. So it is my great pleasure to give the floor now to David Tyree. He is a resident agent in charge for the Drug Enforcement Administration in Wyoming, and he will be speaking on a number of the investigative tools and techniques that he's been using related to the seizing of suspected laundered drug proceeds. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much to everybody, to the panel, and for this opportunity to speak to over 40 countries. It is not lost on me that not everyone speaks English. And after working myself overseas in Portugal and West Africa, I am honored to speak to my European partners again, because that was the highlight of my last 24 years working with the Drug Enforcement Administration. If I could communicate the message clearly, and in the beginning, it's simply to, when we talk about following the money, you have to go talk to people where money is spent. We have had an enormous impact domestically in the United States, tracking money, following money by studying the normal, and then looking for what the abnormal is. We believe about $800 billion is being laundered domestically back down to Mexico and South America from illegal activity. And the criminal organizations are incredibly brilliant when it comes to hiding money in plain sight. So if you don't know, or your investigators don't know what normal is, it's very challenging to identify what's abnormal. And so my presentation is a walkthrough on how we've increased our money seizures from laundered drug proceeds by about 500% in the state of Wyoming in the United States through following the money and talking to industry professionals to understand abnormal versus normal. I will, while the slides are coming up, I will say in the last 18 months in a post-COVID climate where you don't see as much cash money movement, we're still seeing that cash. I'm in enforcement of narcotics. So what we see would definitely, despite there being a cashless society where no one's accepting money because we're not really transacting with cash, we're still seeing money movement. Drugs are still sold for cash, and it's that movement of that cash that causes problems for the organizations. When I speak with law enforcement, I again, working overseas, this was in Portugal, the interdiction of, I believe, 800 kilograms of cocaine by the judicial police, and their military elements from France and Spain participated. And this was on a regular basis. We were interdicting sailboats full of ton quantities of narcotics. So they keep making drugs. It's pretty cheap to manufacture and distribute narcotics. 99% profit margin, they say. So following the money, we found domestically our jurors understand money much more than they do drugs. We are now leading this year, so far in 2021 in the United States, we have over 100,000 overdose deaths from narcotics. And we found that jurors in our court system don't necessarily understand the difference between a kilogram of cocaine and an ounce of cocaine. So when we talk about money, it seems like in our court systems that our jurors do understand mortgages, car payments, payments for toys like expensive boats, et cetera, et cetera. So we're looking for the PowerPoint. It came up for a moment. It was great. If you didn't see it, there it is. So hiding money in plain sight. In the United States, we have law enforcement that conducts what we call consensual encounters or interdictions on the interstates. And it's on a regular basis. We used to see carloads full of cash wrapped in rubber bands that facilitate a quick transaction for narcotics and money. And now what we're seeing more than ever are prepaid cards, where our traffickers, our criminal organizations are able to purchase these prepaid cards at a local grocery store, but they still have to load that money, that cash, into bank accounts. So one of the tips that I would impart to the participants is engage with your banks, engage with the financial units, the anti-money laundering units at financial institutions where you work. Those relationships have proven to be the most productive for me as the DEA in the United States. I get calls and emails daily from financial institutions across the country that are identifying suspicious money movement. And it's because I'm engaging with those financial institutions that they're reaching out. They didn't have a point of contact. And so I work very hard as a DEA agent to establish myself as a point of contact. And the results of those interactions with whether it be Western Union or the bigger banks and even the smaller banks, that those communications are helping us to identify dirty money. Again, when I said we go out now and we find that our traffickers in the United States, because narcotics is an addictive driven industry where addicts are trying to buy narcotics, that our traffickers, our mid-level traffickers, are buying high dollar vehicles, driving around town to show their customer base that they are successful and a consistent source of supply. So we started going out to the car dealerships and identifying large cash purchases, which this is an example when one of the dealerships called us and said, you should come look at this money. With that money, our trafficker bought 4 cars, including this Cadillac Escalade. This is about, in euros, I would say a 50,000 euro vehicle. We seized 4 vehicles from this individual. We were able to search the residence for documents related to the illegal purchase of this vehicle with what we articulated we believed to be drug proceeds. And we recovered about 25 kilograms of cocaine, 4 bank accounts, which we also seized. And again, it was the car dealership, because we had gone out to these high value, high dollar car dealerships, they started to call us when someone would come in and transact with large amounts of cash, source of which could not be confirmed. We did tell them, please sell the car. Don't not sell the car. If you think it's suspicious, let the investigators build their investigation. But amazing points of contact from car dealerships, boat dealerships, airplane, private airplane sellers, etc. In the United States, we have the umbrella of money laundering. It's a complex scheme, which is why investigators often shy away from these investigations. There's those three phases of money laundering where we're trying to identify the placement phase, where that money is entering the financial institution, usually in a way that is hoping to avoid detection by the banks. So what we see, the word of the day is commingling. We will see cash derived from criminal activity commingled with what appears to be legitimate checks. So we see front companies, whether it be construction or whole food distribution lately is something that's blipped on the radar. Any sort of legitimate business, we see about 50% illegal money commingled, so it's mixed in with legitimate money. That's the placement phase. When we see it layered, we see that money move from one account to a different account, maybe in the name of a trust, etc., and then integrated, where that money re-enters the system. And what we're seeing domestically, what I'm seeing the most, is the acquisition of real property, because then your trafficking organization with real property can obtain what appears to be legitimate income from the sale or the rental of those ill-gotten gains through real estate. Before I get into the operation, I would say that what we just recently observed was one of our traffickers went in and bought 9 individual cruises for $9,400 a piece. He paid cash for each ticket, and he had a 48-hour cancellation policy with no penalty. So looking at into the account of our criminal, what we saw, in fact, was a check remitted from the cruise company for $140,000. So the money actually appeared clean to the investigators. When we saw that our target had all this unexplained money, the investigator said, oh, well, he had a refund from a cruise line, so that money therefore must be clean. When we went to the cruise line and did an interview and found out that our target had actually come in on 4 different occasions to purchase these tickets, that was the placement phase, when he brought the cash in to buy the tickets, the cruise line tickets, knowing he had a cancellation policy. He then had the money brought back into his account, layered and reintegrated as a refund from the cruise company, and his intention was to then use that money to acquire real property. We seized the money from the bank account. Laws in the United States allow us to take money, even if it's not the initial dirty cash. We're able to show it as a substitute asset. So I'll quickly go through a case we did in Wyoming. It's hard to see where we are in the United States, but in the word operation, we're that state with the buffalo in it. Wyoming is the least populated state in the United States, very rural, and a small population, but it is exploited for its ease with which one can register a business. Again, we follow the money. We went and observed to one of the car dealerships. An individual had purchased a $76,000 truck. The individual who purchased the truck did not have a credit history, so it seems strange. She had brought in $14,000 in cash to buy this truck, and I believe earned about $9,000 a year. So we already had an asset that exceeded our target's reported income. What we determined was several independent fast food restaurants in between Colorado and Wyoming, that's where I work in Cheyenne, were using a wholesale food distributor that had not registered with the United States to transport food. We have different organizations that you have to register with in order to distribute food. None of that had happened. There was no website for this company. There was no presence. And in order to establish that, we had to go speak with legitimate wholesale food companies to determine if they knew of this company. So we went overt in our investigation as to determine what normal was. We say in the land of the blind, the one-eyed person is king. So what we try, or queen, I guess, in 2021, royalty. What I impart to my investigators is you have to study what's normal. We were investigating a wholesale food distributor. In order to do that, we had to talk to legitimate wholesale food distributors to see what was normal, what is a standard business practice. We have to articulate that in affidavits to our magistrates in order to demonstrate something nefarious. We worked with anti-money laundering organizations established within the banks, communicated our case. They ended up working with us. We saw that our particular company that we were investigating was about 33% cash intensive. That meant of their deposits into their account, 33% were cash. The normal, the industry standard, is 0.5%. So we knew we were onto something. We did not have drugs ever in this case. Spoiler alert, we forfeit 66 bank accounts, $2.3 million. We won the entire case for money laundering. When we ended up doing a search warrant at our wholesale food distributor, we saw boxes and boxes of unrefrigerated meats. It was a carne picada that was actually supplied to the United States to legitimate wholesale food distributors. The company was out of Mexico, we believe, is being run by Joaquin Guzman's family. We're still investigating that side of it, working with our counterparts and financial investigative units in Mexico. But this is not legitimate. Meat's supposed to be refrigerated at least before it's distributed. When we did our search warrant, again, remember I said there was 33% cash intensive transactions by this business. They didn't have a cash register, no mechanism to take in cash. They did have a cash counting machine. Through working with different financial institutions, we identified, as I said, 66 accounts that were involved in this money laundering scheme. We executed search warrants on several safe deposit boxes and recovered hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash secreted in safe deposit boxes, which again can be a crime in the United States. What we saw here, we looked at invoices, and I said hiding money in plain sight. And if you look at the bottom here, you'll see the amount $3.85 and the total of $2,310. Our organization was falsifying invoices to account for all the money deposited into their accounts. Again, if you look there, that you'll see that carne picada, and you'll see the quantity, 1,200 units sold at 20 pounds. This is an enormous amount of meat, which again, we believe they were just falsifying invoices to account for all the money deposited in their account. We had to study what normal invoices looked like through legitimate wholesale food distributors to understand the anomalies we observed. This is an example of the carne picada that was being invoiced by this company, $286,000 in a 2-month period. Next slide, please. And this is from their invoices. That's an enormous amount of meat. What we did see is they had purchased in that same time frame over $331,000 of this carne picada. We then followed that money from the wholesale food distributor that was legitimate, and that money was then wired down to our criminal organization in Mexico. The Mexican government has limited how much U.S. currency can be deposited into Mexican banks. Therefore, they're relying heavily on trade-based money laundering to get that money wired into Mexico and avoid the banks looking at it, or the bulk cash that we used to see going into Mexico. Again, an example, if you look to the right-hand side of this account, bank account, this is all the cash we were seeing deposited into these restaurants that were laundering money on behalf of the wholesale food distributor. And just another example of all that cash movement. This is my final slide. I am so honored to be able to speak to you all this morning. For me, it's the morning. And I quote Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote the book Blink. I highly recommend that book to investigators. He says, whenever we have something that we are good at, something we care about, that experience and passion fundamentally changes the nature of our first impressions. You have to study what's normal and go with your gut on these cases. The only way I believe we can actually impact the crime, organized crime, is to attack the financial foundations of these organizations. I'm not trying to hurt them, but we're certainly trying to disincentivize criminal activity by taking their money. Thank you. I am done.
Thank you so much, David, for that presentation, for the philosophy at the end, and for the excellent walkthrough of the different modalities that money is passing. That was very interesting indeed. I'm now very pleased to pass the floor to Gus Jones, who is a retired police officer from the UK Metropolitan Police. Gus will be reflecting back on some of David's experiences and the points he's shared, and on his own experience with following illicit money flows. So, Gus, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much for asking me to speak this afternoon. Hopefully, despite my age, I'll be able to contribute to this debate. My first experience involved in major financial investigation was when I was in Hong Kong in 1983, investigating a huge fraud relating to the Meulen Bank. Meulen Bank is now departed. And I first came across the term, "you're living beyond your official remuneration," which actually nowadays is called an unexplained wealth order. I think they're an important element in investigating financial links concerned with drug trafficking, in fact, with all crime. If you're let's say a police officer in the Hong Kong Police on $100 a month, and you own 3 MWs, a Porsche and a castle in the New Territories, it's not all come from your granny. So this is hence the following your above your official remuneration. Coming back from there, in 1986, we first introduced legislation in the UK whereby you could trace and seize drug-related monies. Now it's all crime. And of course led to the liaison with banks, reporting of suspicious transactions, in a whole new field for the police. I set up a small team at New Scotland Yard, and we were dedicated to financial intelligence, liaison with banks, other agencies, estate agents, and so on. And the question now I have to ask, is that still happening? Each police force within the UK, there are 43, I think, it doesn't really matter, had a dedicated team a small team of dedicated officers doing nothing but tracing the money, seizing assets. Unfortunately, the bulk of that has gone. These teams have disappeared. It enhanced my small team enhanced our cooperation with the FBI, DEA, Australia, Canada, but our liaison with Europe was somewhat limited during that period. That began to change because I was a member of the very first G7 Financial Action Task Force in our very first meeting in Paris, 1989, I think. Now I know it's much larger now, but this led to an expansion of the investigation techniques in following the money. It also began the sort of expansion of the British drug liaison network throughout Europe. I eventually or shortly ended up working in Italy, and I'll come to that. But one of our sort of major cases then, it just goes to show that back then, London was a major money laundering centre. It's even bigger now, but we dealt with the Noriega case, who was sending huge amounts of money to the London banking system by the bank called BCCCI. It's now defunct. We used to call it the Bank of Crooks and Crime International, but don't repeat that. But nothing changes. The situation in 2021 is far worse. I mean, people put estimates on how much money is laundered through London. It's billions of pounds, billions of dollars, euros every year. Dirty money is actually flooding into the country, and that hardly touches human trafficking, as you probably read. It's a real problem here at the moment. A couple of weeks ago, in one day, 1,000 people were trafficked from France into UK. Now, if you average that at about £3,000 or 3,000 euros, it matters not, per person, I think that works out at about £3 million in one day taken by the traffickers. Now, that money is going somewhere. People have asked me, what are they doing with it? Yes, there are local organisations in France, but that money is going into the system. There's no point. You cannot walk around with €3 million in your back pocket. It's being put into the system. As David explained, I was very interested to hear one of their main messages is liaison with banks and other agencies. I think in UK, we're losing that capacity. I don't know why. In 1989, Judge Giovanni Falcone came to London. I was running the financial intelligence team, and he obviously liaised with my office. We met him in London, and he was at the height of his investigative powers in Italy. The Maxi trial had just been completed, and he was following the money. He was in London to follow the money, not just in London, but also in the Channel Islands. He went from us across to Guernsey. It was the first time I really heard that expression, following the money, the Falcone mantra that I think we all use day in, day out now. He explained in detail in our discussions. It was all about power and money, and there was no more important and successful route to get to the height of organizations, the top of organizations. Of course, he was investigating the Cosa Nostra in Sicily in particular at that time. They were the most powerful mafia organization in the world. Now it's the 'Ndrangheta are probably the most powerful, as coming from Italy. Although the whole sphere has widened to Turkey, to Russia, to Albania, human trafficking, Albanian organized crime groups, perhaps. So this cooperation was essential. Our posts in Europe were widening, and I just mentioned very, very briefly the term a lot of you will know, especially those in Europe, Brexit. Will this affect all the good work which we built up since 1990? Will it be compromised? I think it probably will. Although we still have liaison officers in Europe, I'm told that to a certain extent the trust has gone when dealing with UK. We're almost back to 1990 when we started this whole process of putting liaison officers throughout Europe. Now, I didn't know I'd be posted to Italy during my first meeting with Judge Falcone. In fact, Falcone, perhaps some others in this forum have actually met him. He was an extremely kind, gentle man. He had a knack of dealing with mafia figures, and he gave them respect, apart from his capacity to follow the money. And this is why they spoke to him. So I ended up in Rome as the first British police officer to be stationed in Italy and also covering Albania. And we're obviously working on organized crime, drug trafficking, coming from South America into Italy, and of course, ultimately, a lot of it to the UK. I met Judge Falcone on numerous occasions, and we always ended up talking about money, his mantra, and London, and the link with Italian organized crime to London in particular. In London now, if you go along, and David mentioned about bringing the money, getting it into the system. You must get it into the system. Along the River Thames now in London, there are huge apartment blocks, new apartment blocks, and they're all empty. Now, there's a reason for that. You've got to get your money, corrupt money, into the system, and that's one of the major ways of doing it. I actually saw Judge Falcone at a conference in Rome. He was leading the anti-mafia directorate by then, just 2 weeks before his assassination. This is sort of not a well-known fact, but I noticed that during this conference, I was there with a DEA colleague, in actual fact, who I won't mention, that he was being ignored by all the senior politicians and others in that forum. So I went and spoke to him and said, "What's going on here?" And he just said, "I'm becoming too powerful." This is my term, not his. Too much of a, not embarrassment, but danger to this government, and I've been abandoned. And this is why nobody is speaking to me. And they were passing him by, which, as you know, Italy, that is very unusual. And of course, within 2 weeks, he had been assassinated en route from Palermo Airport. Now, my question is, I'm conscious of the time, that have these lessons been learned? The Falcone mantra in the USA, I think, without date, David's just explained it. In the United Kingdom, yes, we were learning these lessons in the early days, but I think the message is gone. Certainly, the skill set has gone. There was a time in the Metropolitan Police when the fraud squad, who used to be involved in financial investigation and its wider remit, was something like 250 strong. And I was told this week there are perhaps only 20 now. And are they really investigating on the ground? Possibly not. knowing I was coming to speak in this forum, I thought I'd better check with an ex-Metropolitan colleague and an expert on financial investigation. He's still involved in financial investigation in its wider format as a consultant for major organisations and personalities. And I asked him, where are we? Can you assess now with the late 1980s, early 1990s? And his answer was very plain to me. We have slipped dramatically. National agencies' main financial intelligence sources are investigative journalists. They're getting the information from journalists because they've lost the skill set, both nationally and internationally. This is the British I'm talking about. They've lost the skill set to carry out the very functions that David has talked very eloquently about in his presentation. So in closing, all I can say is the UK needs urgently a Falcone or a Borsellino to follow that mantra of following the money, but regretfully, no such individuals are available in the UK at the moment. Thank you very much once again for asking me, and I hope I've contributed.
Thank you very much, Gus. That was a very thoughtful presentation and a demanding, certainly, conclusion as an answer. Question at the conclusion. I look forward to hearing others' views. I will remind all of you that you're very welcome to ask questions or make comments in the chat, so feel free to do so as the conversations go on. And we'll look forward to a discussion on these topics after the final presentation. So in that, I'm very pleased to hand the floor on to Niels van der Meulen. He is a senior police officer for the Dutch police and has a lot of experience in his role at financial investigations and is looking forward to sharing them with you now. Niels, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tuesday. Hi there to all of you. I already love this conference, although I'm new here. One of the reasons is that it is, it makes available such a huge network. And I work for the Dutch police, but I'm detached to a network organization of public organizations, in which, among others, are, the police, of course, and like the tax authorities, and a couple of municipalities in Greater Amsterdam, and also the prosecutor's office. Well, one of the things this organization on the holistic approach of organized crime wants to do is build up knowledge. As you already noticed, I'm otherwise than Gus and David, not a native speaker, so I hope you can follow my presentation. But one of the things that we wanted to do at this organization is to learn about how do those illegal criminal money flows work. And one of the subjects we have been into are money transfers. And I will tell you something about the things we already found out. And I'm also glad to get tips or hints from you about what else we could do. I will tell you something about, the trends in cash. David already told you something about it as well. I think they will be very general, so it will be soon. Then about criminal cash and that cash is still king. And then I will go into what are money transfers and how are they related to criminal cash. And then I will tell you something about the way we think we can combat this problem. And we will also would like, to see if we can have some discussion about that. Well, one of the major trends worldwide is the less use of cash. The Netherlands is one of the front runners in this trend. And that means that there are becoming less and less legal businesses that are really into cash. Another trend is that we get better and better banking controls. This is especially true for the Netherlands, since there have been a couple of major investigations in a couple of the great banks in the Netherlands, and those investigations have led to huge. I'm sorry, I'm lost the word of huge fines towards those banks, and as a reaction on those investigations and fines, those banks have contracted literally thousands of people that are involved in anti-money laundering and due diligence sector. So the Dutch banks at this moment, they produce a lot of suspicious transactions, which is of course a big knowledge part to know how the illegal flows work. So those two trends combined, the less use of cash and better banking controls, they led to the difficulties by the criminals to get rid of their cash. We still see that criminal cash is king, although this is already 7 years old report from Europol. It is also what I myself and my colleagues still see explicitly in the drug scene. Everybody who wants to use drugs buys it with cash money, and this cash money still has to find its way. Although cryptocurrency are on the rise also for criminal use, the use of cash money is still very big. Okay, and from our organization, we have done a project on money transfer organizations. This is like when you look at Europol reports, most of the time they talk about money service businesses. The money service businesses are a little bit wider than especially those money transfer organizations. Those are the organizations, well, they're here, Western Union, Money Trans, RIA, Small World, which are the providers, and they make it possible to hand in cash at a certain place in the world and get the cash somewhere else in the world. And they make use, those providers are like huge international organizations, and they have very good AML systems as well. But they make use of agents, and those agents are local. As you can see, two examples from the Amsterdam area. And those agents are so-called shop-in-shops, which means that they provide the Western Union or RIA possibilities, but they are in a grocery or they are in a phone store. So it's one of their businesses they run, and those agents can use the infrastructure of those huge organizations. And one of the weaknesses is that the customer due diligence takes place at the agent level. We have made typed three types of agents. And what we see in our analysis is that you can have agents who transport criminal cash without their knowledge. You can have them who are in consent of it, and also help the people that want to send their criminal cash. And there are agents that are really complicit and are part of the network. And those three types, you can see certain types of abuse, which are on the right of this sheet, so-called smurfing, which might be familiar to a lot of you, but it's the thing that you do is that because of AML standards, a certain amount of money is always reported as suspicious, and to stay beneath that amount, you make it in parts. So you make parts of 400 euros in different on different agents, and then they don't have to report your transaction. This is called smurfing, and it can be used without the knowledge or consent of the agent. but it can also be offered by the agent. Another type of abuse is the manipulation of IDs. That is in case the amount has to be reported, then it is very interesting to report it from somebody else than is actually there. And this will be a type of abuse that is with knowledge or consent of the agent because he is participating or even asking for this to do. Another type of abuse is that the agent is used as a cover for underground banking. All those agents, although in the Netherlands, or not although, in the Netherlands, they have a license. And this license makes it's controllable, but what we see is that they use the license to make it easy for people to enter and to have a lot of cash money inside. But on the other hand, on the background of the store, also do some underground banking. And the fourth type of abuse is that the agent is used for transactions of the criminal network it is part of. And this can be transactions by the facilities of the providers, but it can also be transactions from the shop in which the agent is placed. And in this case, the AML of the banks is very useful because we get a lot of reports from banks that tell us that amounts of cash money are deposited on their bank accounts. And it's not clear if this cash money comes from their work as an agent for one of those providers or from a third source, maybe criminal. Well, this is my final slide for my story. Might come that some of those suggestions are a little bit out of the blue, but we have done analysis and also controls. And from there, we have found out that some of the people that work in the agents have criminal records, which we found very awkward and we would like to see elsewhere. Another thing is that it would be good to make an end of the use of the manipulated or multiple IDs. A third way of stopping or ending this practice might be to have less concentrations of many transfer agents, and this is mostly targeted on the smurfing actions, because smurfing becomes less attractive when you have to travel around to put the different parts of money to the different agents. Another thing is that it would be good to have a strict registration in a register and in the Chamber of Commerce of who is a licensed agent, because sometimes it is thought that it is difficult to see if somebody is really licensed. And at last, and this is most of it from the suspicious reports of the banks, is that it would be good to have some kind of third-party bank accounts on which the cash money that comes from the transfers has to be deposited and no other money comes in. The banks at this moment, it's hard for them to tell where the cash money comes from. And when there is like a one-on-one relationship between the transfers and the amount of money they have to transfer to, for example, Western Union, it becomes far more difficult to misuse those agents. And I said discussion here, but maybe it's better to end the presentation and get the floor back to the panel on Tuesday. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Niels, for that excellent presentation. We will indeed now open the floor for questions. We've had a number already, so I will encourage those who wish to still ask a question to please drop them into the chat relatively soon. We'll have about 20 minutes for discussion. What I'm going to propose that we do is that we cluster questions for the different speakers. So I will just summarize the three now that have been directed at David. And David, I'll ask you to answer them first. If you look in the chat, you'll see them written there too. So firstly, there was a question to you. Can FIUs and AML officers now spot these crimes simply through profiling firms like the meat company that you referenced? And what could researchers do to spot these crimes in publicly available data, such as in trade statistics? Secondly, a question, being a retired US federal law enforcement officer, I'm amazed how state authorities like Wyoming and Delaware have easy incorporation laws. Is this something that only indicative to US states, or is it a global phenomena? And maybe other panelists would like to respond to that particular question as they make their remarks. What can be done to mitigate criminal elements from using this avenue to conduct money laundering activities? And then finally, David, do the car dealers only accept the criminal proceeds, or do they also provide false paper trails for the criminals to hide them and their financial flows? David, to you, please. Can you come back on video,
Sure.
panelists?
Sure, yes. And I apologize, I'm putting my video back on. Okay, so those are great questions, and I'm gonna read them up in the chats as well to make sure I answer them intelligently. I'm gonna go backwards. With the car dealerships, there's very little that in the United States that somebody needs to provide if they wanna do an all cash transaction to purchase a vehicle. And that's what we'll focus on. The dealerships that are legitimate will file a form, and we will review that form through a subpoena process and actually subpoena the whole car file. It's been my experience that when, regardless if it's a cash transaction or not, the dealerships will have the purchaser file a credit history report, and we'll rely heavily on that credit history report to demonstrate, as the panelists already discussed, that the purchaser doesn't have the reported income to support that asset. And in our system in the courts, that's, for us, it gives us a strong footing to say that this is probably purchased with proceeds of a crime. And we will corroborate that information by investigating the purchaser, looking at phone records, seeing who they're speaking to, doing social media searches, etc. And look, in the United States, we do call it dope. And some would argue that's because the people we deal with are dummies. If you're a drug trafficker, you're bragging about it on social media, has been our experience so far. I hope that answers that question. Working backwards from those questions, and I didn't bring my glasses. Okay, with regard to establishing limited liability corporations in the United States that we would talk about as front companies, Wyoming is probably, if not the easiest, the second easiest in the United States, because you can go through a registrant online. I believe it's $50 to establish a business that does not have a brick and mortar presence in Wyoming. And we work closely with the Secretary of State to try and investigate that further, but it's very challenging. If someone opens what in the United States we call a limited liability corporation, what they're doing is saying, I have a business, I am in construction, and it's David's concrete business, and I established it in Wyoming, but I can operate anywhere in the United States. And it's up to us as investigators then to get those bank accounts and talk to those in the legitimate construction industry to determine if what we're looking at in that money movement is outside of what's normal. So it's unfortunate, I guess, we're looking at organized crime, but if you're looking at it as somebody, free enterprise, and they're wanting to establish businesses and make those rules easier to promote industry. We can't always look at it as people are out trying to commit crimes all the time. But yes, I would say that Wyoming, and then I believe Rhode Island and Oregon are very easy states to establish these limited liability corporations. I will also tell you that in a post-COVID climate, many states are moving to this online process, which is making it easier for criminal organizations to open up companies online without ever having to go into a government building and provide any sort of documentation. Next question. And I'm looking, and I should have brought my glasses. Let's see. I'm missing the questions. Can you help me out?
Definitely. So the third question to you was if you could, on the car dealers,
yes,
are they just accepting the money and doing the transactions, or are they also falsifying documents to actually facilitate illegal transactions?
The car dealerships aren't doing that so far. The legitimate car dealerships aren't doing anything to facilitate anything illegal. They will accept the money. And this is part of us going out and talking to the dealerships. The number one concern the dealerships have is if a bad guy comes in with a bag full of cash, can they sell the car? And we say, please continue the transaction, but notify us, because otherwise our targets will go elsewhere. The dealerships themselves, so far, I haven't seen anything they're doing illegal, because again, if someone comes in with a bag full of cash, the dealership's only required to file a form indicating as such if it's over $10,000. They're not required to do much more than that in order to facilitate that transaction. So we haven't seen the dealerships doing anything nefarious. We also don't see our targets trying to finance that purchase over the course of 3 or 4 years. They want to get in, pay for the car, and get out. We do see oftentimes that they will use a proxy purchaser. So they will bring in maybe a girlfriend, a boyfriend, somebody who has no association with a criminal organization. And that requires us at times to talk to car salesmen. And I hate talking to car salesmen. I would rather put needles in my eyes. But we do that to establish who the real purchaser was. And it's questions like, okay, we saw that the tires were upgraded. Who made that decision? And the car salesman will say, well, it wasn't the female that bought the car. It was her boyfriend. Okay, that name would never show up on the documents. So sometimes we do have to talk to the car salesman. And I apologize in advance for that if anyone's in car sales.
Thank you, David. Much appreciated for that very concrete example and for your responses to the questions. We have a couple of questions I'm now going to direct at Gus. Gus, you've been asked, firstly, if individuals in the UK had the skill set to follow the money, what other barriers, for example, legislative, would they face in doing so? I'd also ask you, please, to also pick up this question, which has been asked, and I think your long experience would help to give a good insight, which is, they were wondering, since following the money flow is such a time-consuming process and a lot of other resources go into it, is there any point where some cases are not being considered because they're not worthy or not big enough? And similarly, is there a way to prioritize cases, for example, those with links to terrorism or mafia groups?
Yeah, thank you very much. The first question is fairly easy to answer. Originally, only related to the legislation, that is, to drugs. Now it covers all crime. So yes, the legislation is there. It affects all crime. And of course, disclosures, we talk a lot about financial institutions, but the suspicious transactions actually applies to everybody. Estate agents, car dealers, as David has explained. If someone goes in with £60,000 in cash and buys a new car, I'd say that's a suspicious transaction. So it covers all, the legislation is there, as it is with the unexplained wealth orders. Now, with regard to who you're going to target, yeah, you've got to choose, obviously. You can't sort of follow the money everywhere. So, but the important thing, back to Falcone, the only way to get to the very top, to the top of these organizations, whether it be terrorism, drugs, human trafficking, is by following the money. It's the only way you'll do it. There's no other way to do it. So yes, you have to prioritize, but it really is, that can be done at the lower level as well. You've got to prioritize, but that really is the crucial way of doing it. I hope that helps a bit.
Gus, sorry, thank you, Gus, very much. Finally, round of questions to Niels. There are 3 questions to you. Firstly, has there been a positive development of participation of the criminal justice system in the holistic approach in the Netherlands? Not that long ago, researchers complained that law enforcement and prosecutors did not participate and treated the holistic approach as a fallback when prosecutions were not viable. Second question to you is that in the Netherlands, I have the feeling that a lot of barbershops are used for money laundering. Is this something on the radar of the Dutch police? Two questions for you in addition, which were posted to the panelists as a whole. Firstly, is starting an investigation on money flows, so actually the start of a new investigation, or will it be related to a previous case? And then finally, if you could, there's a question on cryptocurrencies. So how do you think that cryptocurrencies and smart contracts are altering the IFF landscape? And do you think there's capacity in regulation bodies to respond? Niels, to you, and then we'll give everybody in the panel a chance for a short concluding remark to sum up everything that we've discussed over the last session. Niels?
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's recognizable. I do recognize the way it's stated that it's, how do you say that? It's difficult to get prosecution and criminal investigations together with all kind of different other approaches. Although, well, that's why I'm here. I'm a strong believer in that it can be very, they can really strengthen this. And in my own region, I see that more and more people also involved in the policy decisions in police and prosecutor office, well, do get involved in this. So I'm yeah, how do you say this? I'm hopeful in that this will be a strong development for the next decade. And that's also what I see in the position that the Dutch government takes in that. About the barbershops, well, the barbershops are known alongside with the tanning salons and the souvenir shops, etc., etc. So it's not that, well, I'm not aware of one special project on the barbershops, but I'm aware of the fact that they can be used. It's also cash-based economy partly, so that's familiar. And on the cryptocurrencies, well, as far as I know, the National Bank of the Netherlands is now a supervisor on cryptocurrencies for the Netherlands, which means that every platform that is based in the Netherlands has to cope with AML regulations, and people have to identify it. Well, I think that helps in a small way. On the other hand, well, it's known that with crypto, it's very easy to get to different jurisdictions, so it will help a little. I would also like to react on the car dealer example of David, because I've been involved in a case in which we got this suspicious report from the car dealer. In the Netherlands, you also as car dealer, you have to report cash payments. And we have used this cash payment as a start for an investigation, and it helped us to identify by his girlfriend a real big drug dealer, which was not in view of the Dutch police beforehand. So that's also nice to see that it works out that way. So far, thank you.
Thank you very much, Niels. What I would like to do in the last 5 minutes, and thank you everybody for the engaged discussion, is just give all of the panelists 1.5 minutes just to sum up on their concluding thoughts and takeaways, what you really feel that this panel and the participants in it need to remember from your comments. So I'll go in reverse order for a change and give the floor to Niels first, if you don't mind. Come back, Niels.
Yes, there I am again. Thank you very much. For me, I think it's, and I heard it also by David and Gus, it's very important that you are there with your complete network and that you make use of others, their knowledge and their information. And that is not only public organizations, but it's also the banking organizations. And in my project, it would be very nice to see if we could involve the providers themselves in our investigation. So that's, I think, one of the major points in following illegal money.
Thank you, Niels. Gus, to you, and then finally to David.
Yes, thank you very much. Once again, thank you very much for involving me in this. It really has been enlightening, and it's confirmed, having listened to the other two presenters, that it's confirmed that all my outdated thoughts are still very current, and long may they last. Very briefly, while in Italy, I compiled a thing called the Rome Report together with a senior Foreign Office diplomat. About 40 pages circulated throughout UK and Europe, talking about all these issues we've just discussed today. But to see any more further of details of the Rome Report, you have to wait for my book to come out, 3 Bullets on the Doorstep. Thank you very much.
Oh, nice plug, Gus. Thank you. So check out Gus's book, everybody. And finally, David, you opened us. Please close us out.
Sure, I'll be plugging my Netflix special, although Netflix hasn't agreed to do anything with me at this point. I would simply say that if the takeaway should be financial crime and predicate crime, whether it's human trafficking, drug trafficking, fraud, they're not mutually exclusive. And following and identifying suspicious money movement should be the focus. And from that, you'll find the predicate crime. Again, my message is TTP, talk to people. None of us are secret agents. We have to go out and understand the industries so we can, and when we study what's normal, abnormal will rise to the surface. And these cases should not be set on the back burner. They should be on the forefront of everyone's mind. If we're actually trying to impact transnational organized crime, we have to attack the financial backings. That's the only way we're going to have impact, especially in the world of narcotics. They will continue to produce narcotics. There'll continue to be a demand for narcotics. But if we can attack the financial incentive behind that crime and have impact, I think it's measurable and it actually impacts the communities where we live.
Thank you so much, David. Excellent sum up and conclusion and motivational message. To everybody who's joined us in this panel today, I offer on behalf of you all, our thanks to David, Niels, and Gus for taking the time to discuss with us and share their experience. Everyone, thank you for being part of this discussion. I hope you will join subsequent sessions of our OC24. There are a number on similar themes related to illicit financial flows and practical examples of policing. There are, if you look at the schedule, sessions on the organized crime in the private sector, on enablers to organized crime, which is looking at some of the policy frameworks. Sorry. And there are sessions on, for example, confiscation of assets, organized corruption. So plenty on offer over the next 24 hours. Please do check them out and give us any feedback you have on this panel or others. Thank you very much for joining OC24. See you later, much later.
Thank you for listening to the OC24 podcast. For more talks, have a look at the podcast feed on whichever platform you use. There are loads more to listen to. Video versions of these talks are also available on the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime YouTube channel. If you would like to share these talks around, we ask that you use the hashtag OC24 and let us know what you think. The 24-hour conference on global organised crime is brought to you by the European Consortium of Political Research Standing Group on Organised Crime, the Centre for Information and Research on Organised Crime, the International Association for the Study of Organised Crime, and the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. For more information, head over to oc24.globalinitiative.net. This has been the OC24 podcast from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. Thanks for listening.